We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day is going well. We have the good fortune of having Ed back, as we try to do every week. We know that people look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to talking to you. And here we are. We should let folks know that we're recording this on Friday around noon, depending on where you're at. So this is being recorded before there's been a vote on this CR, this continuing resolution. So we don't know really where it's going, but we kind of have a sense. Welcome, Ed. And since this is the thing most eminent, whether it passes or it doesn't pass, we can talk about the process that's gotten us to this point. And it's just been fucking ridiculous, isn't it?
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
There's a Tennessee Williams play. It'll come to me before we're done here, and I'll say it to you. But anyway, there's a line in it near the end of the play. The tables have turned. The tables have turned with a vengeance. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. Always before, it was the Republicans trying to crash the government, shut the government down. I mean, it was always them trying to do it to harm Biden in this case, or when Obama was president, they were always trying to shut down the government, right? Now the tables have turned, but what the Democrats are trying to do is stop this horrific budget bill from passing. I mean, they want to negotiate. They have bills of their own. I mean, this is what Congress is supposed to do. Both sides are supposed to come together. Each gives a little, and you get a deal. Now, they can't pass it with just Republican votes. So they have to have some Democrats, but they're refusing to budge on this. So the Democrats have no choice but to shut the government down if it comes to that. And, there'll be, insults thrown on both sides back and forth. But eventually Republicans will capitulate. They have to, because it hurts everybody, including Republicans. So if I don't want the government to shut down, but if that's what has to happen, then fine, I'm good with it.
You made the point that this particular resolution was put together completely by the Republicans. There was no negotiation with Democrats or even input by the Democrats. And this is why the Democrats are against it. Of course, it passed the House. One Democrat voted for it. One Republican voted against it. But it passed in just by minimal numbers. But now it's in the Senate. It needs 60 votes to do it. We've been hearing up to a certain point that the Democrats were going to push back on it. Then we hear about John Fetterman in Pennsylvania saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for it. Then we hear about Chuck Schumer yesterday saying he's not going to block it, meaning I don't even know what that exactly means, but Chuck Schumer is capitulating on this thing. And this is part and parcel to what I've talked about before. I'm tired of the old people, tired of the pussy ass, above it all, take the high road type thing, because we're in different times right now. And that's old school fucking strategies.
Right. The only ones talking sense are Bernie Sanders and AOC. And the ultra liberal wing, the Republicans would say, I consider it the sane wing of the Democratic Party. Right after the election, we started hearing many Democrats want the Democratic Party to move to the center. And that's bullshit. That is nothing but Republican talking points being fed to the media that they dutifully repeat. No. The Democrats, true liberals, do not want to move to the center. If we wanted to move to the center, we'd be frigging Republicans, and we're not. You will never win by being Republican light. We've seen it many, many, many times. We've seen this capitulation. We've seen this going, people pretending that this is business as usual, and it is not. It is not business as usual. The Republicans are trying to destroy the government. They're trying to make it small enough to drown in a bathtub, just like Grover Norquist wanted.
Right. Well, this Republican light, Kamala may even have been accused of something like that by embracing Liz Cheney. As much as Liz Cheney has integrity, she still is a radical hard right-leaning person, and she's not in line with the Democrats at all. And a lot of people think, I think, that because she embraced her, instead of just gaining some Republicans, which she didn't, she basically pushed away the progressive left, and
I
that's what
agree.
screwed her.
Yeah, and it's too bad because Democrats are always too anxious to do the kumbaya thing and
Yeah.
welcome in people that they simply should not. Because as you point out, for all of her for all of Liz Cheney's turnaround toward Donald Trump and so forth, she still was against everything I'm for and everything Kamala was for. So to go arm in arm with her was somewhat demeaning in a way to someone running seeking my vote. No, I don't want that. If Liz Cheney is going to go out there and campaign against Trump, that's terrific. That's great. But she lost her own district, and her father practically owns Wyoming, and yet she lost. So that tells me that she was never going to bring any Republicans to Kamala Harris ever.
Well, that's one of the things I told people. You act like Liz Cheney did some great thing that you're going to put her up on a pedestal. All she did was exactly what she should do as a member of Congress and a human fucking being,
Exactly.
whether she's Republican or Democrat. Truth, law, justice, what's right. That's all she did. And that's the very least we should be able to expect out of all our Congress people, as opposed to just Liz Cheney.
Exactly. And there is no honor left in the Republican Party. None. Zilch.
Yeah.
Nada. Zero. None. So don't expect anybody to come around. They are all on this bandwagon. They have always been on this bandwagon since Reagan, and many of them who are old enough before Reagan have always wanted to destroy the social safety net that was put in place by the Roosevelt administration and maintained by the Democrats as long as they could, expanding when they could, and so forth. But no, they have never supported that. No Republicans ever voted, or very few of them have ever voted for any social change. They have stalwartly refused to do that. People will point out, and I will address this, that yes, they did vote for civil rights, but they only did it because they knew it was harm the Democratic Party eventually, and
Yeah.
that's why they did. But they opposed really everything after that. So it was a strategic move on their part. It was not in any way them seeing that it was the right thing to do.
I was telling RC yesterday when he had him on the show that you pointed out many times that once Social Security and all the social safety nets came out
Mhm.
with FDR, immediately that's when the Republicans started to try to tear it down. It's just now that they're
Absolutely.
starting to get a foothold, but they've been
Yeah.
doing this all along the way.
Yeah, I had a bit of an insight too. I want to share about that, about Social Security. I wondered why for many years and certainly recently, why the people who live here where I live now, for folks who haven't heard before, I lived in Minnesota for many years, 50 years, and Mike and I worked together there. Then, after I retired, my wife and I moved back down here, primarily because we had many elderly relatives that needed help and so forth. And now they're pretty much gone. But I thought this place had changed. We came here on visits every year and so forth, and I assumed that things had changed. Once I moved here, of course, I found out that they had not changed at all. In fact, they had gotten much worse. And one
Right.
of the reasons is I wondered why these people vote Republican when the Republicans are constantly trying to take away things that a goodly portion of the population uses, like SNAP, like Social Security, of course, Medicaid in particular. Why are they voting for people who want to essentially, throw them out in the street? Because that is ultimately what would happen. And then I realized that starting in the 70s here, when I was a kid, 1949, I was born, through the 50s and 60s and so forth, all this industry from up north came down south. They were fleeing the Rust Belt, the high cost of labor and so forth. They moved here because there were no unions and they could pay much less there were very little environmental restrictions, so they could dump and whatever they wanted to do, and they did that, and so forth. But people did get jobs in these assembly plants and so forth, and the standard of living went up. Even though they weren't making the kind of wages they made up north, a $60 an hour steel maker's job,
Right.
at the time they were making $10 and $15 and so forth, which was amazing compared to what they had made, which was virtually nothing. There was no minimum wage, so we're talking $2 or $3 an hour, maybe being considered good. When I started working at Kingsport Press in 1967, my first 2 week paycheck was $175. So it gives you an idea, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, during the 70s, the push to offshore started, first to Mexico, then to other places south of the border, then across the ocean to India, Vietnam, where China, all of this. So these all of these jobs that had come in disappeared gradually, 99% of them, and so it went back to a service economy. So the people here, they mow lawns, they hang drywall, they do that sort of thing, and that means two things. Number one, they don't pay taxes. That's underground economy, okay?
Yeah.
And as far as anybody knows, they ain't even working, right? But they don't pay taxes, but also they don't put anything into Social Security. So, or very little, maybe they had a job for 20 years that went away. So then they started mowing lawns, whatever. They will draw the very minimum of Social Security, $500, $700, $800, something like that. And so they have no incentive. They don't think they're going to get Social Security, or if they do, it will be minimal. So they have no option but just keep plodding along, working and so forth, hiding their income as best they can and so forth. And that's why they don't push back. They don't see it as something they're losing because it's something they never had.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the case with a lot of younger people. I know it was with me when
Mm.
people talked about Social Security when I was in my 20s and 30s. I go, people would say, "You're never going to get Social Security," and I go, "I don't know. I don't get it now. So what difference does it make?" But that's the point is they've been saying we're not going to get Social Security when I was 20, and they're telling 20-year-olds now, and I disagree. The Social Security thing is such a big point of issue in this country because without Social Security, without Medicare, this country pretty much falls apart. Not only for older people who can't afford things and will be homeless, but it will totally fuck the economy.
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you an example. I just put this up on my TikTok yesterday. Uh, there are roughly 70 million people in the United States drawing Social Security benefits. Now, that's not just retirees, that's also SSI for people who are injured and so forth. And it's also the dependents of people who have died or been killed and so forth. And for example, I have a cousin. Her father was killed in a car wreck when she was like 6 or 7 years old, and her sister was younger. They drew benefits up through 25, so they were able to the age of 25, so they were able to use those benefits to go to college and so forth, and do
Right.
very well for themselves because that was there. If that goes away, no one will be able to do that. Elon Musk was not aware. He was touting, well, there's people 7 and 8 years old getting Social Security. It's obviously fraud. He's a moron. He's an idiot when it comes to anything except buying things that he can exploit for money. That's all he's good at. He is not a smart person. He has no knowledge. He's just like Trump. Neither of them, they operate purely on stuff somebody told them at the country club or whatever. He did not know that. He did not understand that. He didn't understand why the date, the birth dates kicked to 1874 for some people because of the COBOL system that they use. He knows nothing. And all of this fraud that they're seeing does not exist. For the moment, everything is audited every year. Sure, stuff slips through the cracks. Sure, there's families where grandma was living with the family. She kicks the bucket and they keep cashing the checks. Yeah, that happens. Right. But you don't find that by reducing the number of people who work for Social Security by, tenfold. You don't close offices and so forth. You don't find fraud that way. You don't send a bunch of teenagers in there to go through this and just hit delete, delete, delete all day long. That's stupid. It's really stupid. And anybody who tries to defend it is stupid.
It's incredibly stupid, and there's now starting to get some pushback. I know Tesla stock is dropping like a rock, and that's a big issue to Elon Musk, because it's not just that he's losing the company. A lot of other things he's bought, like Twitter, maybe SpaceX to a certain extent, have all been leveraged on Tesla stock. And when that shit drops, and it's dropping hard, then all of a sudden these people go, hey, where's our money?
Yeah.
We need our money. And this puts Elon Musk into being the richest man in the world to being the most fucked man in the world, which could happen and probably will with Tesla. No hopes of Tesla coming back. I really don't believe that. It's so desperate that there's this group on TikTok and the internet called Anonymous.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why Trump did this car commercial in front of the White House, which is so embarrassing, was that apparently Elon Musk was behind closed doors and the fucker's just weeping because he's so upset about what's happening. Who knew? If I was an asshole to the whole world, they'd stop buying my shit. My God, who knew? But
maybe a narcissist.
yeah, maybe a narcissist. But when they say he's weeping behind closed doors and they say that's a rumor, if you saw the last time he was on television, he looked a little weepy then too. He was upset, which I love.
Well, think about it. Think of the cognitive dissonance in a man, I'm talking about Trump here, who has been decrying electric vehicles for the whole time that he has been around. They're awful. They don't work, blah, blah, blah. Internal combustion engine, and then he's out there hawking Teslas, and he bought that. He can't drive a car. He said, I'd like to drive it, but the Secret Service won't let me. Bullshit. He cannot drive a car. He's never, ever driven a car. He'll sit behind the wheel of a garbage truck, but he doesn't drive it. He doesn't know how. He doesn't know how the pedals work. He doesn't know how to turn it on. And one thing about Teslas, did you know that more Teslas have exploded into flames and killed people than Pintos? And they pulled Pintos off the market. There was 230 of those, I believe, is the figures. That may even be high, of Pintos that exploded when they were hit from the rear. Teslas, same thing, only there's 100 and some odd more of the Teslas who have exploded rather than the Pintos. So they should be taken off the market, quite simply.
You would think so. And part of the reason why they get such favorable attention from the government is because, and this is one of the reasons why Elon Musk is in there messing things up. He's got problems with FAA, with SpaceX. He's got problems with all kinds of agencies, with Tesla, and he's trying to save himself from all that bullshit over and above trying to steal everything. It's funny. I've heard talk that Tesla's board of directors may be trying to get together and talk to Elon Musk and either kick him out of the board of directors or what have you. And I'll be honest with you, at this point in time, there's no saving Tesla. It's not coming back. He burned that fucker down. The reason why people don't want Teslas, it could be because they're good or not good. It's they don't like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And then Elon Musk is so oblivious that he sees what it's doing to his stock. He sees what it's doing to the stock market, but he just keeps doing it. That's a absolute symptom of a narcissist. I cannot admit I'm wrong, so I'm going to double down and triple down until I can't anymore. And that's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, and you just described not only Donald Trump, but also Mussolini. He was famous for saying, I would like to be wrong sometimes, but I never have been. I'm always right. Who else have said something almost exactly the same? Right?
Well, the
These
same guy,
guys. Go
same
ahead.
guy who said I don't have to ask for forgiveness from God. That's the
Yeah.
same guy.
Yeah, exactly. And, people talk about Hitler. Forget about Hitler. It's not a one for one between Trump and Hitler, but it is a one for one between Trump and Mussolini, who's the guy who actually invented fascism. Fascism. I can't say it. Fascism. Who said it was a blend of government and corporation.
Right. And the thing about Mussolini, what little I know about Mussolini, he does compare better to Donald Trump. And I understand what I'm saying here. Hitler was crazy. He was evil. He was a son of a bitch, but he had some intelligence. Mussolini was kind of a blowhard, non-intelligent human being too. If what I've read is, if I understand what I read.
He was a populist in the same way Trump is, where he appeals to the ignorant and he got them behind him. Um, when you look at what he was wanted to do, I mean, he wasn't throwing anybody or trying to throw anybody in death camps that I'm aware of. Perhaps when he and Hitler hooked up, he may have deported Jews from Italy, to the camps. I'm not sure. But when he talked about the government and corporation, the corporation he envisioned was a government creation that included both labor and management, and they would be forced to work things out to the betterment of everybody, he said. But he never implemented that. He just became a dictator and didn't know what he was doing, wouldn't listen to anybody. So he's very much Trump.
And we know how it ended up for him. But then he be
Yes.
hanging from a light post or something?
Yeah, upside down, dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If only. If
Yeah,
only.
if only. Yeah,
Well,
but
well,
I'm not
well,
going to go that far quite yet. But if somebody's trying to kill me, I don't care what happens to them. Okay,
I'll put
and
it this way. I won't go that far in public yet. But
exactly.
well,
Mm.
and part of the reason, people like Mussolini ended up the way they did is because people finally got tired of it and started pushing back. Now, as we're recording this right now, and I'm anxious to see how it turns out, there is scheduled at noon Eastern time, which is a half hour ago,
Yeah,
in Washington, D.C., a veterans protest at the Capitol.
yeah,
And there's also veterans protests at each and every one of the 50 state capitals around the country.
right.
Um, this is going to have an impact because this pushback does have an effect on Donald Trump because he's so concerned about being popular, and
Mm-hmm.
he becomes confused when thousands and thousands of people say we fucking hate you, or town hall meetings happen and they shout him down. So it's important to keep this noise up. I'm anxious to see what happens with the veterans today because they are a big part of this country and they are being fucked with immensely, and that pushback needs to be made.
Absolutely. I mean, I hope that has some impact because I know that Republicans are all they do is sing the praises of veterans while voting against their benefits. Talk
Right.
about how much they love veterans, but they always vote against any sort of bucking up of the system. They try to privatize veterans' health care rather than maintaining veterans' hospitals and so forth. They've closed them in Nashville, which is not too far from where I live. They closed veteran facilities there, and they keep trying to deny. They will deny benefits. I mean, it took Jon Stewart going to Congress at least a couple of times to get any sort of burn pit legislation. Agent Orange was a huge fight for years to get that recognized as something that affected veterans and their progeny, birth defects, and so forth.
Right.
There's a biblical phrase: "The parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge." That's not a direct quote, but that's it. I mean, it goes to the seventh generation. That it was that terrible that Agent Orange was inflicted on our troops, and then they tried to deny it. And it's always a battle. It's always a battle to get veterans benefits, like it is to get SSI. Now you have to have a lawyer. That's insane. It's a giveaway to the legal industry. If you're going to apply for SSI benefits, you're going to need a lawyer. Otherwise, they'll just keep denying you. But you get a lawyer, by golly, if you get the right one, you're going to get the benefits. So what does that tell you?
Tells you people who can afford a lawyer can get the benefits, and people who can't afford a lawyer don't get the benefits, which is bullshit and contrary to what this country and what these benefits are supposed to be about. It's fucking ridiculous. As you're watching Congress now going through this budget bill, we see that the Republicans are shameless. They don't care. They will vote for things they know are absolutely wrong. But I'm increasingly frustrated by the Democrats. There are a handful of Democrats that are hustling out there. You know, he's not in Congress, but just 2 months ago, people were saying Gavin Newsom would be a great presidential candidate. He'll be the guy in 2028. And I said, hold on, things change quickly.
Rapidly.
And that's a long way away. Now we see Gavin Newsom doing these podcasts, and I'm sure he's trying to build up the viewership or listenership, and he's talking to Charlie Kirk, and he's talking to Steve Bannon, and he's being a pussy about it. He's not pushing back on these people at all. He pretty much ruined his possibility to ever run for president again as long as he continues to do this bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, he's a flashy character. I'm not sure he's the best. You know, I mean, when you live in California, if you're the governor, you're reigning over the seventh best economy in the world, not in the country, in the entire world. If California wanted to split off and say, hey, we're the Bear Republic or whatever, they could do it and they would be just fine. They have everything they need there to do it. What they should do is say, nah, we're not going to send anything back to Washington. We don't need to. You're going to deny us FEMA funds for fires and so forth, and you're going to open all the water dams so that it flows into the ocean rather than having it for when we really need it. Well, you've declared war on us, so we're not sending you any more money. Neither, and any blue state that's sending more than they get back right now should just say that. We will match a red state. That's all we will do. That's what you're going to get from us. We keep in the rest.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when we talk about blue states and red states, we've gone through this whole thing where Republicans have gone out and done town halls, and they've been just decimated no matter where they go. And they try to tell us it's Democrats causing the problems. That's never been the case. That's not Democrat speed. Republicans are getting hurt and they're pissed off, and they have the audacity to call you out on it. So they say, we're not going to do any more town halls. We might do some Zoom calls because then they can vet the callers and the questions before they get them. And people have become hip to that, and they're not liking that too much. But now we've got people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, even Tim Walz going into red areas and holding town halls. And I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. Stir this shit up.
That's right, because people don't hear it otherwise. They only watch Fox. Around here, for example, they only watch Fox News. They only, if they're online, they go to the websites where people just agree with them and they can fume about liberals and so forth. But they don't ever get that kind of input. But they're going to learn now, right? Over the last 2 days, we've had Donald Trump saying, we're not going to touch Medicare and Social Security. We had Johnson, the Speaker of the House, we're not going to touch those, right? But then we have Elon Musk saying, well, you'll never get real savings unless you take on entitlements, by which he means Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, right? You have the Energy and Commerce Committee that the Republican budget calls on them to reduce $880 billion from their budget. There is no way they can do that without impacting Medicaid. Now, they're going to try to do it through the back door now. Here in Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, who is one of our senators, is going to put up a bill that would make a work requirement for Medicaid. Now you're sick, you can barely walk, and you got to go to work. Okay, that's so they will reduce. They'll just throw people off because they can't work. If there's a work requirement and you can't work, you can't walk, you can't. You're so sick you can't in any way get a job. Who's going to hire you, first of all? That's another thing. There are many areas here where there are no jobs. That's why these people are mowing lawns and hanging drywall. There's not a job that they can go to get benefits and so forth. So they're dependent on Medicaid. Also, I've heard that they're going to try to cut the Medicaid money that goes to states that have expanded Medicaid. Now, if you don't know what that means, here in Tennessee, they have resolutely refused to do that. But the federal government has looked at states, and they're almost always red, and they say, we will give you more money for Medicaid. All you as a state have to do is pick up the administrative cost, which usually are negligible. And yet then you get all of this money that you can give more people health care. But Tennessee refuses to do it, as does most red states. So then they're going to try to penalize the blue states that have actually done that by reducing the amount that they get. That's another tactic they're looking
at. When I look at what's going on today with Republicans in the House, the Senate, and Donald Trump, and how badly it's going, the positive side of me says this has got to happen in order for stupid people to understand what's going on. It's got to come crashing down around them before they make the change. And I'm hoping against hope, once this crash happens and we go through this bullshit, we turn into a new era in 2028 or whenever that shit happens, that people just go, okay, we've had enough of this. It's fucking killed us. Now we've got to look at something more left-leaning. It's always amazed me how the Republicans will take the middle class who pay the bulk of the taxes and say that any help to the middle class is too much money. But it's so short-sighted, because if you continue to drain the middle class, make it so kids, younger people can't buy houses, they don't get paid enough, the whole economy will implode because nobody can afford anything. And when nobody can afford anything, there is no more economy. I don't know if that's their intention or they're just short-sighted.
I think it is their intention. I think it really is. I think they want to break the country and take it back to the Gilded Age. And if you don't know what that is, that was in the 1800s, from roughly 1850 to 1900, when there were a few oligarchs in charge, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all of this. And mostly they dominated industries like oil or railroads or something big like that. But then they started to expand, and they had trusts and monopolies and so forth. So that literally all the money in the country basically came to them. And you can drive across this country now and see these palaces they built. Each family, Rockefeller probably had 20 of them in different states and so forth. These gigantic houses that nobody can afford to live in anymore. So they're maintained as kind of like museums and so forth. That's the remnant of the Gilded Age. But it took a progressive like Teddy Roosevelt to start busting those up. And then the Depression, of course, reduced a lot of those fortunes and so forth. And they instituted an income tax. And the working people were finally, by the time Roosevelt was in office and enacting his reforms, were finally able to start acquiring property so that they could build wealth and pass it on. That's what happened. And it was the liberals, it was the progressives who made that possible. That golden age that people want to go back to, it was a Democratic creation. A Democratic creation. Republicans had not a goddamn thing to do with it.
I gotta just tell you this. This is off topic, but I think it's funny. My brother sent me a meme.
Yeah.
And with Tesla, you know how Tesla's stock is dropping?
Yeah.
CNBC is calling Elon Musk stock decline the Tesla chainsaw massacre.
I love it.
Fucking like it. I like
Yeah.
it. I like it a lot.
I'd
Uh,
love to have him standing on an on ramp. We'll jump in the air for food. That's what I want to see this guy reduced to. He's such a loser.
well, how can he do anything but fail in a huge way because Tesla stock is dropping. That's not coming back. People aren't going to start buying Teslas. They hate
No.
that motherfucker.
Yeah.
You got Twitter. He paid 44 billion for. It's leveraged against Tesla stock, which is dropping. It's now only worth maybe 10 or 9 or 10 billion dollars. So he's lost money there. And the last two SpaceX flights have blown up over the fucking ocean. This guy
Exactly.
is in a death spiral right now.
Yeah. Well, the as far as I'm concerned, SpaceX was nothing but a toy anyway. Um, the satellite stuff, okay, yeah, that seems to work, but none of this was him. This was stuff that he acquired, of course, and put his name on. And I'm sure there are many of his businesses where the boards are looking at him and saying, "We got to get rid of you, or we're not going to have anything left." Tesla being one of them.
But even if they get rid of him, I don't think that fixes it.
No,
It's
it
too far
doesn't.
gone. It's too
Exactly.
far gone. And I think the downfall of Elon Musk is the first hurdle that we've got to get through because Donald Trump doesn't have the courage or he's as ignorant as Elon Musk, but Elon is so arrogant, ignorant, and so stupid that he is doing what he's doing, even though he knows it's crashing his own life, he still continues to do it. When he finally crashes, there's got to be a point where Donald Trump said, well, Elon's a loser. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And he'll be kicked to the curb. And I think that'll be a good start for this because for if no other reason, Elon's more proactive than Donald Trump. Donald Trump talks a lot but doesn't do anything. Elon Musk is stupid enough to go in and start bringing a chainsaw to the labor department, the education department, what have you, and just create a fucking mess. They keep losing in court, but that doesn't stop the chaos and the mess that he's creating and leaving behind.
Exactly. And let me give you an example of something that's happened. Speaking of education, something that happened here in Tennessee recently is they finally got their voucher bill through. And what that will do, of course, is take money from the public schools, the tax money that comes out of everybody's the taxes that everybody pays, including me, goes into a big pool for education, right? And it's supposed to go to the public schools, but they come up with this school choice thing. Well, it's the parents' right to put their kids wherever they want to go. They can put them in a private school or religious school, so forth, a charter school, that sort of thing. So the tax money that they put in that would normally go to that individual, it would normally go to the public schools, then it's given back to them to give to one of these other schools. And they sold it with the idea of, well, that will let kids in substandard school districts. If you know there's a substandard school district, fix the fucker. Come on. Don't. What are you going to do? Is everybody going to leave that school district? No, there aren't enough private schools. They don't have to take everyone, especially those with special needs or those, say, black kids that they don't want their kids sitting next to. There's nothing that can make them admit anyone to a private school. So that money is just a giveaway to people who already have kids in private schools. How do we know this? Because New Mexico, Wisconsin, and a couple of other states have done this experiment. And in that case, I saw three of them. Two of them, 76% of the people who got the money already had their kids in private schools, and two of them, and 89% in Wisconsin, already had kids in private schools. That's who got the money, not the disadvantaged kid in the Memphis slum. No, because there was nowhere for them to go. Charter schools, they fare so badly academically, they shouldn't even exist. And yet there's also a provision that if a hedge fund invests money in a private charter school, In 10 years, they doubled their investment. So this is what's going on with education. And now they're trying to destroy the Department of Education so they can do it even quicker.
What do you think happens if they are successful in crippling or getting rid of the Department of Education? We know, the only thing I know for sure is that all funding for special needs kids pretty much out the window because they handle that. But there's a lot more to this than that, isn't there? I mean, they don't. The Republicans think that the Department of Education controls curriculum, and they don't. It's state by state. You can
Right.
do what you want state by state. What do they accomplish by shutting down the Department of Education as opposed to fucking over a lot of people who need help?
That's it. That's all. They want to destroy public education. Remember, my generation, I was born in 1949, right? And my brother was born in 48. We were among the first kids who really got what we think of as a traditional education. My mother went through the sixth grade, my father the third grade, and that was typical. I saw a graduating class of Rogersville High School in like 1950, and there were like 18 people in it.
Wow.
Now, that changed almost immediately with the baby boom. They had to build new schools, they had to build about 15 schools in the early part of the 50s to accommodate all the kids. And education really started to become something. There was no Department of Education yet. That was much later. But still, the idea of investing in public schools only started with my generation. Sure, there were some around, but there was no compulsory attendance. You didn't have to go till you were 16. Most people learn to read and write, do a few little arithmetic, their sums and so forth, and that was it. They were done, except for a few lucky ones who maybe went to private academies or got tutoring or something like that. But this is a public education on the level that we're used to was a phenomenon that did not really exist, at least in this part of the country. I can't speak for New York and so forth, but it did not exist in this part of the country until after World War II. Not in any real way.
I personally said I think of all the crises in this country, education is one of them. There's an epidemic of stupid, and people think I'm being flip about that. But sit
No.
down and talk to somebody sometime. Anytime I talk to a Trumplefuck, I'm amazed by how ill-informed and unaware of what's really going on in life. They just don't get it. I mean, if you throw them a conspiracy theory, they're all over it, even though there's no evidence of it, but they don't understand what's going on. You know, people still telling me, well, Biden shut down the Keystone pipeline, or Biden sniffs kids' hair, or whatever the fuck. I mean, open
Yeah.
your fucking eyes and read a newspaper or listen to a legitimate news report if you can find one.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I did a kind of a look-see at my reunion, and then I went back to the annual, and I went through it, and I determined that about 10% of my graduating class learned anything,
Really?
anything. And guess where they live now? Not here. You
Yeah.
know, they moved, they went on to better things. But so people they don't read newspapers. If they did, it wouldn't matter because now they're all compromised. So they go online and they listen to their crazy uncle rant or whatever it may be, or Steve Bannon or some of these right wing websites. And worse still, the other people who want to destroy public education, evangelicals. They
Yeah.
absolutely want the public education, the public schools destroyed and done away with. And they go so far as to malign teachers and call them groomers and say that they're putting litter boxes in bathrooms for kids who identify as cats. I mean, there is no lie they will not tell in pursuit of their goal to destroy public education. They believe the world is flat. They believe God is on a cloud above their head and the devil is in hell beneath their feet. You know, they believe these ridiculous myths, and they totally want that to be taught in schools as reality. It is not.
In 2020, I said on social media, I think it was Facebook, I said that evangelicals are an enemy of this country.
Yes.
And I have a relative that apparently, not a blood relative, thank God for that, but a relative nonetheless that has family members that are evangelicals. And he confronted me one time. He said, "You said evangelicals are an enemy of this country." Yeah, I said that. He goes, my family's evangelicals. I go, fine, but that doesn't change my mind. They
Yeah.
do what they do. And as much as Donald Trump has destroyed the Republican Party, I feel like the evangelicals or the radical right, religious right, they have pretty much destroyed Christianity. Whether you believe in Christianity or not, it was for good for a long time, but it's not anymore. It's a political fucking entity that is bent on causing problems and diminishing people that aren't like them all over the country. I'm not saying Christianity was always great. I guess I consider myself a Christian, but I had problems with it back in the 70s when I was a kid. That's why I never assigned myself to any particular religion. I don't think organized religion is is good because too many tainted people looking for power and money are running it. I think if you have a belief in something bigger than you and the way the world works and what's good, that's fine. You don't need a church to tell you what you believe. But I think evangelicals have pretty much destroyed Christianity in the minds of young people in this country. People in this country don't want to hear about Christianity because they see it as a negative force.
Exactly, and that is why the Christian nationalist, which includes whether they know it or not, most evangelicals, they know they can never, by conventional means, proselytizing, so forth, charity work, whatever, they will never attract the numbers that they had in the past. So what they want is a theocracy that forces everyone to kowtow to their beliefs. They
Right.
do not want religious freedom. They, to them, religious freedom is their freedom to push their religion on you, and that will never work because we saw, and that is why the founding fathers, such as they were, imperfect individuals, recognized one thing, and that was that Europe had been torn apart for centuries simply with religious wars. The Hundred Years' War, the 30 Years' War, these were religious wars. Catholic versus Protestant, heads being chopped off, hundreds of people being murdered, and genocides practically through every European country. And they wanted to avoid that. And for this length of time, we've been able to do it. I begin to question if we'll be able to do it much longer because, quite frankly, there are some of them who want to seize power and create a theocracy by any means necessary. And we've seen what they do to I've even heard that they're using a term for non evangelicals, unhumans or non humans. That's what they're calling anyone who does not ascribe to their particular version of Christianity, which is not Christianity at all.
Yeah, what would Jesus do? Probably not that.
Right.
It's funny though, when you talk about the evangelicals, the way you're talking about the evangelicals, it sounds like the Republicans are emulating the evangelicals. They
Well,
know they're losing a base, so they're trying to shove it down our throats. Cheat.
they've been running the Republican Party for many years. Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is very much one of them, and so are many others. And they have chosen Trump as their anointed because he attracts the kind of adulation that they need in order to get their policies through. There are two billionaires in Texas who support every wacko thing that the Texas government has been able to do. And believe me, we don't even know half of it because we don't concentrate on that. But they do that, and every state has that equivalent, or they have a network of these people. They've been working on this for 50 years too, trying to get get control of the government, make it a theocratic a theocracy
Right.
where they have all the power and they can force you to go along or be killed. They're not above that.
Yeah. I want to talk about the economy a little bit with the tariffs. This has really been an interesting, well, it's not interesting at all. It's terrifying. But Donald Trump is kind of trying to wield tariffs as a club. It's
Yeah,
not so much an economic attempt by him, it's more of a bullying strategy. I'm
yeah,
going to give you a tariff if you don't back down, because that's how he's always done business. But when they don't back down, he ramps it up. It's like what I was saying about Elon. He's going to keep ramping it up and doubling down and tripling down until he falls off the fucking cliff and takes everybody with him. You're looking at the economy now. Donald Trump said prices would go down as soon as he took office. He said that as soon as Joe Biden came into office, the stock market would crash. And that didn't happen. It went the other way, obviously. And then he said when Kamala Harris took office, if she won, the stock market would crash. Well, now Donald Trump's been in office for 6 months or 6 weeks, and the fucking stock market, I think you can literally say it's crashed. It's gone down by 11% from a high of 44 and a half thousand
mhm.
points to down around 40,000 points. It's lost almost 4,000 points in 5 weeks. He tries to blame it on Joe Biden, but it never happened under Joe Biden. It
Nope,
didn't happen until Donald Trump, dumb fuck Donald Trump, showed up.
exactly. This is the thing. Let me just throw one more point in about the evangelicals. There
Sure.
is no difference between a hardcore evangelical and the people running Afghanistan right now, the people running
Taliban?
Saudi Arabia, yeah, the people running Iran. There is no difference. They operate from the same book. We call it the Old Testament. That's where they get their prohibitions and everything that the way they treat women, the way they treat anybody who is anything other than a straight white male. That is, and it's the same. The Abrahamic religions, regardless, they all have that propensity to go either toward to the light or toward the dark, and they almost always go to the dark.
Go to the dark. They live in an antiquated world, stuff that we've
Yes.
already passed by, and it's frustrating to watch. And I would hope younger people, women particularly, would push back against that.
Well, and it's not all Christians. I'm talking about only the evangelicals. I mean,
No, I get that.
we saw the lady who asked Trump to lighten up with the deportations and so forth, and how she was roundly turned on by quote Christians. So there are good people. There are people within every church who actually have the message of Christ and use it every day as their guiding light, but they are not, for the most part, evangelicals.
I think a good representation of evangelicals or just Republicans in general
Yeah.
is the situation we have with Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Yes.
Now, Amy Coney Barrett is ultra conservative, ultra religious, basically even part of a cult, and she was appointed by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Now, when the recent decision came out about stopping all funding and she voted against Donald Trump, which was the right thing to do, I give her credit for having some integrity and decency and understanding the rule of law. But as soon as she did that, these people that cheered her, that put her on a platform, uh, her sister is now getting death threats and bomb threats and that sort of. That's how vile and how rabid these motherfuckers are. And I'll guarantee you, I bet it's some religious motherfuckers, some
You know it is.
evangelicals that are behind that shit.
You know it is. Now, she is a radical Catholic. I mean, I don't know the exact group she was with, but it was something where she lived with a couple where the guy was in charge of everything and so forth.
Yeah.
But she's radical Catholic. And then there are also the radical, what we would generally think of as Protestant. But ultimately, those two can't live in the same, they cannot function together. So that let's say it happened. Let's say they were able to put together this theocratic government. Within a few years, there would be militias on both sides, and we would have a religious war in this country between the Catholics and the Protestants, such as they are, and the what I would call the fringe religions, Seventh Day Adventist, Scientologist, Jehovah's Witnesses. Those would be purged. Those would be either driven underground or killed. And it would be just these the evangelical, extreme right wing religious groups on both the Catholic and the Protestant side killing each other. That's we know that would happen because all you have to do is look at history and you see it.
I learned about the troubles between Catholics and Protestants. Back in the 60s, I lived in a block in South Minneapolis. Half the kids who were my friends on that block went to St. Albert's Catholic School. The other half of us went to Longfellow Elementary Public School. And we would play together and have fun and play all kinds of games, kickball and stuff, and everything would be fine. But as kids go, sometimes you get into some dust-ups. You argue, you get in fights. And your 7, 8-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids would get into this argument with another kid, and they would go, "You fucking Catholics, you Lutherans." And it would be an argument about religion between 8-year-olds. And they had no
Yeah,
fucking clue what they were talking about. All came from mom and dad because mom and
yeah,
dad were saying, "Oh, those fucking Lutherans. Oh, those fucking Catholics." And it's the whole thing seemed ridiculous to me one time. I didn't know any better one time. Uh, Somebody said, "What's your religion?" I go, I'm Christian." And they go, "No, I mean, what's your religion?" I go, that's it. And I didn't know any better. And it just pissed them off that that's what I
yeah,
was saying. I had to pick a side. I had to pick a side. And if I wasn't on the right side, they were going to go after me. It was
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, let me make because I lived in the same neighborhood you did in Minnesota, but I didn't move
Right.
there until I was mid 20s. But so I missed that. But I was at that time an evangelical, so I went to a local evangelical Lutheran church, and I found a separation there between the private school Lutherans and the public school Lutherans. And they did not tend to get along that well. They didn't tend to date across that line. They didn't tend to go to parties across that. There was a division between those who went to Minnehaha Academy or something like that and those who went to, as you said, Longfellow or Roosevelt High School. It was a very, very sharp line.
Yeah, it was a weird situation. I didn't understand it because I was a little kid. But my father said to me one time, my uncle was married to a Catholic girl. Okay. And they were having all kinds of problems. Uh, they ended up getting divorced. They were both a little fucked in the head. They both drank a little too much. It was a bad situation, and they broke up. And I remember my dad talking to my uncle while this was going on. And I grew up, I guess we went to a Missouri Synod Lutheran church. It seemed pretty low key and pretty not real intense.
Very
Uh,
conservative, though.
yeah, very conservative. Um, and I didn't know from conservative when I was 10 years old. But the first thing he said to me um, after he got off the phone, he says, "Do not ever marry a fucking Catholic. They're fucking crazy." So at 23, when I got married, I married a Catholic, and I can attest they are a little fucking crazy. But I did marry Catholic, and I'm working on 42 years now. So fuck you, Dad.
Yeah, it all depends on how reasonable each person is willing to be. Um,
Yeah.
I quite frankly, at one time in my life, I was attracted to Catholicism in large part because of the pageantry, because of the set rules. Because if you get into Protestantism, man, it is uncharted territory. Because the mainstream Protestants, they have seminaries, they have rules that they go by. They have all sorts of things going on there. But the further down you get into Protestantism, the crazier it gets. And you get these people who are basically cult figures who start their own little church, and sometimes it grows, sometimes it doesn't. But they just say whatever pops into their head, assuming because they are, quote, a godly person, then God is always speaking to them. It is total craziness. And quite frankly, if somebody wants to be religious, that's just great. But I give you one thing: love your neighbor. If you can handle that, great. You got it covered. Other than that, you don't need anything else. You
Yeah,
don't.
that's absolutely true. I started talking about the economy situation, Donald Trump crashing the stock market. Uh, Republicans love to tell you, how do your 401ks look now? Well, I have a regular guest on the lives and on the podcast from time to time. His name is TJ, and he's a union leader in Pennsylvania. So he's pretty well locked into what's going on. He has investments. He has a 401k. He said in the last 6 weeks, he's lost $30,000 in his 401k. Now he's in his mid 40s, so he's got time to recoup it. People like you and me don't have that option because we're too old. I would say, I put some of half the investments we had into the property down in Savannah. And my financial guy thought that was a dumb idea. In retrospect, it was a great idea because I get to enjoy it and the money stays there and it's not going to me anyways, it's going to my kids. So I'm comfortable with that. I'm more comfortable than what's left in the account right now. I think we lost a couple $1,000 in the last 4 weeks or something. But this has got to be even notice has to be taken by even the Republicans who continually complained about their 401ks under Biden, which was ridiculous. Now that they see these dramatic drops, is this the point where they go, holy fuck, maybe we were wrong?
Well, I hope so. I made more money under Biden than I made under any other president in my investments. Okay. We recently, my wife and I sat down and we made some moves. But you are correct. I would suggest that anyone who is looking at, someone as young as that person, if you've got money left, put it in real estate, put it in something that is real. The people that's why they call it real estate. Okay. It's real. It doesn't go away. And let me just say this about real estate. Trump's tariffs. Okay. He eliminated USAID, right?
Right.
Which canceled contracts to farmers. Many of those farmers are going to go bankrupt because they had invested assuming that they had a deal that was unshakable and that they were going to sell that crop to that organization, to the government, and that they would make a profit. That's not going to happen. Those have been canceled. So they are stuck with this, and there's no thing. They got to let it run. And the double whammy is all of their field hands disappeared. They're in hiding there because they know that ICE would come to get them out of the field. So it's a double whammy. They're going bankrupt. The bank will take that real estate. It will be the Dust Bowl all over again without the dust, because people don't realize it wasn't just an environmental disaster. It was an economic disaster because the farmers had crop failure 3 and 4 years in a row. The banks came in. They took the property, they bulldozed the houses and barns, they set it all in crops again, a corporate farm, and that's where the big corporate farms came from. It was the destruction of the small farmer during the 1930s, and that's what they're going to do again. And I'm not sure it's not 100% on purpose.
Yeah, it does seem to be on purpose, or they're incredibly stupid. That's what we did. We took out half of the money and we bought the property down in Savannah. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. It's a condo on a nice property in Savannah. It's something we can enjoy, someplace we can go. But even if the real estate goes down, my wife and I are never going to sell this condo or that condo. That's going to be up to my kids, and they're young, so they have time. If the real estate market is shit, they can wait. They can wait and sell it, rent it, or whatever the fuck they want to do. But people like you and I, well, in 2008, I know you took a big hit. My wife
40%.
took a big hit.
Hmm.
We took a big hit, and at that point, we still had a little time to recoup it,
Yeah.
and to a large degree, we did. And people are happy with, well, I recouped it. Well, imagine where you'd have been if you didn't have to recoup it. That you could
Right.
have added on to what you already gained. Donald Trump
Exactly.
has basically now wiped away any gains made between just before he was, uh, I don't know, elected or inaugurated. But
Yeah.
he's wiped away any advantages that have been gained in the stock market. People have to understand that when Donald Trump left office, the stock market was at about 30,000. The Dow was at 30,000. When Joe Biden left, it was at 44,000. That's
Yes.
significant increases. Now it's
Yes.
back down to 40 with Donald Trump in charge. You can't deny it. You can't distract. You can't divert. It is what it is. Donald Trump is the president, and you can say whatever you want about Biden, but what Donald Trump has done has been a direct result as to why the stock market is reacting the way it's reacting.
Right. And let's look at this too from an economic viewpoint. Okay. One of the big things with Trump was that we were throwing all this money at Ukraine, and they would, and so forth. What we were really doing was buying material from American companies and sending it to Ukraine. We were reinvesting in our economy. Those salaries to those people making that, the company's dividends from that, and all of that was being going back into the economy and was actually helping us. It's the same with the farmers. If you take this aid and we're sending it to countries who really need it, so people won't starve, um, but we are buying that from our own farmers. They are getting the money, they are reinvesting it in the economy and so forth. So every time you stop something like that, you're actually hurting our economy. They don't understand economics at all.
And it's one thing if they said, okay, farmers can no longer sell to these foreign countries. That would be one thing. But what they essentially did is pull the rug out from under them in the middle
Yes.
of a deal, in the middle of a season. Now they got a bunch of money tied up in equipment and, of course, in crops. And that deal is done. So they're stuck with rotting crops and equipment they can't pay for. It's one thing to cut them out of that whole deal and not allow them to sell, but they fucking destroyed them in the process because now they've got all this debt and all these crops that cannot be sold, and they're just absolutely fucked. And what's funny to me is the USAID, when we found out that the farmers were going to get hit so hard, somebody with common sense would say, "Oh, whoops, I did that. I shouldn't probably do that." But they continued to tear down USAID knowing that the farmers were getting fucked in the process.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't care. And it's a win for the people who give them money, and that is the corporations who own and operate these farms, and they get that land dirt cheap because the farmers default. And
Right.
they cannot pay, so they can come in and get it dirt cheap, essentially give the farmers nothing, and in some cases, probably the banks that the farmers default are the ones who actually take the property. And then they will sell it to someone else, or maybe if they have an arm that's a corporate farm thing, which with all the consolidation and everything, they probably do. It's a big win for them.
Well, there was always talk about Donald Trump taking over and the tariffs and how it was going to crash the economy. We're already in free fall. Where do you think that takes us? I mean, how does that impact the average Joe and how do they react to this situation, especially the Republicans when they start getting their ass kicked?
The intelligent people will already know, and they see what's happening, and hopefully they're trying to take some evasive action. Trump supporters, the MAGA crowd, they're going down with the ship. They will never ever turn on Donald Trump. Even they would any more than they would turn on one of their religious leaders who's found to be, having 14 mistresses. They'll still be sending him money as long as they can do it because they believe. And it's the difference. I've always maintained that the difference between a conservative and a liberal is that liberals believe in critical thinking. They try to find as much information as they can before they make a decision, whereas conservatives merely believe. They think all knowledge is in, nothing can be added. The world is 6,000 years old. A man lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days. Donkeys can talk. It's belief. It has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah, that's one of the things that frustrated me more than anything from the Kamala election. I always try to go with logic and common sense. That's always fared pretty well with me. If you go with logic and common sense, it works. And now we find since the election on November 5th, there is no logic, there is no common sense. So I don't even know where to fucking turn. I can just make my best guess based on whatever crazy shit uh, is is happening. Um, I was going to ask you because you're an older guy. Do you remember any politician in history that had the base like Donald Trump does that will believe anything? Because it always seemed to me that in politics, people were real fickle. They'd vote for somebody, and then when it got bad, they go, I hate that motherfucker now. But that's not the case with Donald Trump. I can't think of any politician who's been afforded that.
Reagan.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right.
I mean, he's still popular with some people. I mean, he's got an airport named after him, and he was a total failure as a president. All he did was run up a huge deficit. He was treasonous because he struck deals with our enemies. He also, he went to Iran and said, "Keep those hostages, and I'll give you a good deal." He colluded with our enemies. He paid for death squads in South America to kill people. He ignored the AIDS epidemic. Nothing that he did was good. He destroyed the mental health system as it existed at the time, and that's where a homeless problem came from in large part. Everything Reagan did was awful and terrible, and people still talk about putting his head on Mount Rushmore. If they'd done it while he was alive, I'd have been fine with that. But no, he was a failed president completely, just like every other Republican president of my lifetime, except possibly for Dwight Eisenhower. And I even have some quibbles about him. I mean, he deported more people than anybody ever, for example. I mean, certainly Nixon was a failure. Reagan was a failure. George Bush Sr. was a failure. George Bush Shrub was a bigger failure. And Trump, of course, the worst of all.
And Trump is the stupidest of all. A lot of them had some intellectual problems, but
Ford
Donald
too.
Trump is absolutely.
Ford was also a failure too, but he just didn't have us long.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about deportations, and they're becoming frustrated with these deportations because it's not happening as quickly as they want it to. They forgot a couple things: logistics, money. They don't have any of those things. There is no common sense to it. But I wanted to bring something up because during that State of the Union speech, remember when Donald Trump so emotionally introduced that child with cancer, and it's a sad situation. There's no question about it. And Democratic Party didn't clap for this kid. And it had nothing to do with the kid. It had to do with the audacity of the Republicans using him as a pawn while at the same time taking away cancer research for children. It was so fucking ridiculous. But there's one other thing that if you're ever in an argument with a Trumplafuck about not clapping for this kid with cancer, not understanding what was going on there, Donald Trump cares so much for people, kids with cancer, that he recently deported 2 undocumented parents
with a cancer kid who is a citizen.
Yeah. The three kids they have were born in this country. So, by way of the Constitution and the 14th Amendment, they are legitimate citizens, whether Donald Trump believes it or not. He just sent something to the Supreme Court to try to win again, and he's going to lose that one because the Constitution says what the Constitution says. But he sent this young girl with her two siblings away out of the country. She's getting cancer treatments for brain cancer. And now they don't know if she'll get those treatments. So don't tell me you care for cancer kids because you fucking don't. And you proved it in this deportation. Do you think Tom Homan gives a fuck, that big, goofy looking, Fred Flintstone looking, Porky Pig looking motherfucker? Somebody needs to take that dumb motherfucker down.
Well, this is it. Two things on deportation. I was going to bring up the same one you just did. Yeah, they were actually on their way to get cancer treatment when ICE picked them up and they were deported. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Reprehensible 100%. The other thing, I think why it's slowed down and what nobody wants to talk about at all is they are not deporting them. They are putting them in for-profit prisons where they are required to work for as little as they are paid as little as $1 a day, and if they refuse to work, they are put in solitary confinement or their food is reduced. So this is what is happening to a lot of the people who are being rounded up, some of whom may even be citizens, and they're also being placed in municipal jails and county jails and stuff all across the country, where the county jails are happy to have them because they get paid for a certain amount for each person they have in jail, right? So this is being used as and it's huge. I just saw two of the leaders of for-profit prison CEOs saying this is the best thing that ever happened to us. So that's what's happening. It's slavery. It's modern slavery. It's legal slavery, and they are doing it. And yes, they are doing it. There is no doubt about it. That's why they're not deporting them. They're just using them as slave labor.
And this is something you and a lot of people have said to watch out for when this all starts to happen. This is similar to the internment camps for the Japanese back in World War II.
Absolutely.
Maybe even worse.
It is. Well, that was bad enough. And that was, Democrats and Republicans did that. They'll throw it on FDR because he was president at the time, but legislation was passed and it wasn't just him. But yes, that was reprehensible. Why we did it with the Japanese and not the Germans, I don't know. What could it possibly be? Xenophobia, maybe? Yeah. No. And that was business as usual for black people during Jim Crow. Arrest them for vagrancy because they didn't have a job and throw them on a chain gang for the rest of their life. That happened. We know it happened. And now they're just doing it with Hispanics instead of blacks, although they're probably still doing it with blacks too. I'm sure that because I saw something about, they asked one guy who had been in prison and gotten out. They said, "What surprised you most?" He said, "Everybody's black in prisons."
Yeah.
And while that's not 100% true, it is damn close.
Yeah. Well, then we have the situation with the young man at Columbia University. This happened after Donald Trump nixed a $400 million grant that went to Columbia University.
Yeah.
And then this Mahmoud Khalil is protesting against for Palestinians, and justifiably so. They pick him up, they scoop him up. He's got a pregnant wife, and they whisk him away to a Louisiana prison. This guy committed no crimes. He is a legal resident. He has a green card and that sort of thing. And I heard Marco Rubio says, well, they don't have the right to have the green card. Well, maybe so. But you, as an American politician, don't have the right to put somebody in jail for saying something you don't like. That's a little thing called the First Amendment. Now, I think this guy will ultimately get out, but to have to be put through this stuff by a government that should be solidly against anything like this. I mean, it's a stain on this country, not only in this country, but around the world. You know, we talk about war crimes and we talk about um, inhumane treatment. We're fucking doing it.
Oh, we always have. I mean, um, my brother was, you know, armed forces guy. We both served. You know, he was Air Force. I was. He's always been very patriotic, very pro-military, and so forth. And we have discussions every now and then. And I point out to him that we've never been the good guys in the way that we were taught in school. You know, from first grade on, any history we had, we were always the brave pilgrims, we won this war, we won that war, and it was all for the good and so forth. But we've committed just as many atrocities as anybody else. The country began with genocide. It was expanded through slavery. We worked our will in South America. We took land, this and that and the other, from other countries, just like Trump wants to do, taking Canada. We did with, you know, all of the Southwest and California and so forth by force. We took islands all across the Pacific when we fought Spain and so forth. We've been expedient and so forth. We do a lot of good in the world, but that's mostly because of individuals doing it, organizations that spring up to do it. But as government policy, our government policy is not that we are the good guys. Our government policy is we're going to do what's best for us in our estimation, period. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but if you're committing atrocities to do it, there is something wrong with it.
We're getting down toward the end, but I wanted to bring up the whole Ukraine-Russia thing. Donald Trump told us that he would end the Ukraine-Russia war within 24 hours. All it would take is a phone call. That turned out not to be the case. And it turned out to prove that Donald Trump is siding with the enemy as opposed to our ally. That's pretty clear in everything he's done. He goes into Ukraine and he comes out and he's so proud that he's talking about, we've come to a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. Okay. But you haven't talked to Vladimir Putin yet. And Vladimir Putin comes out and says, well, in principle, we like the idea of a ceasefire, but we have to talk about some of the details.
Yeah.
Which means Vladimir Putin is going to make more. Yeah, we're going to keep shooting, make more demands. And I'm wondering if this is going to be a pivot point for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, all he cares about is going in looking like the hero and ending the war that Joe Biden couldn't. That's what he wants to do. But he's going to go up against Vladimir Putin, who's doing nothing more than playing Donald Trump. And Donald Trump does not realize it. When Vladimir Putin doesn't allow Donald Trump to get this win, is he going to get pissed off at Vladimir Putin, or is he just going to continue to kneel to this fuck?
Trump can't get pissed off at Vladimir Putin because Vladimir Putin owns Donald Trump. Largely because of things that he knows about him that he can very easily reveal that would destroy him. He has the tapes, he has the photos, he has the signed contracts. He could destroy Donald Trump anytime he wants to, and Trump knows that. What he was hoping for was that Trump would, or rather that Putin would somehow give lip service to what he was doing and so forth. But he failed. Well, where he really failed was to think that Europe would go along. What they're going to do now is to cut us out of the equation totally. I give Zelensky a great deal of credit. He offered to resign as president, but he made some stipulations, and one of those it had to do with Ukraine being a part of NATO. And Europe is looking at that, at making Ukraine part of NATO and kicking in even more. And they were already kicking in more of us, more than we were. And this money we were supposed to be giving to Ukraine, we didn't. We gave it to ourselves. We bought the equipment. We sent it over, right? So we had economic benefit. But no, Trump, or rather Putin, will play this however he wants to, as long as he wants to. But Trump has no influence over him at all. Zero. He has influence over Trump. He can tell him to jump backwards and do 3 flips, which he couldn't do, but he would try. He would try.
Yeah. Some people are worried that Donald Trump wants to pull us out of NATO. And I say that's not the biggest concern
Mm-hmm.
because Congress has to get us out of NATO. What I'm more concerned with, based on our behavior and the fact that they can't trust us with intelligence anymore, they might kick us out of NATO.
Oh, I think that's coming. I really do. I think at some point, Europe is going to say, well, we had good relations with you for a long time, and it was for mutual benefit. But when you start voting with Russia and North Korea against our initiatives in the UN, we're done. When you start threatening
then
your neighbors.
Well, then Donald Trump will be the guy. Then Donald Trump will be the guy that will say, "You can't quit me, I quit you." That's the spurned lover, as it were, and that will piss him off, and it will be not good publicity for Donald Trump, and it puts this country at far greater risk for terrorist attacks. I mean, I was talking to RC yesterday, and everybody brings up the Article 5, where if one NATO country is hit, you got to fight all of them. They'll be there and back you. Donald Trump talks about NATO nations not paying enough. Well, as I pointed out to RC, and he knew, of course, the only country that's ever needed Article 5 was us during 9/11.
Exactly. And of course, we have to correct no NATO nation pays anything. You just agreed to spend a certain amount of your GDP on defense. That's all it is. Nobody's paying anybody anything. And Trump doesn't even realize that any more than he realizes how tariffs work because he's an idiot.
Yeah, he's an absolute idiot. Well, I'm going to wrap things up here. I know you got shit to do. I don't, but I know you do. So I'm going to let you go do what you got to do. I appreciate you coming on. Let people know how they can find you. They definitely need to check you out if they haven't already done so.
Well, if you go to at Holler Troll on TikTok, it's actually reeling in the years with an apostrophe, REALIN apostrophe IN the years at hollertroll.com on TikTok. Same thing on YouTube. The YouTube stuff's mostly archived. I need to get some stuff done. I've been working on some stuff. I've got one on DEI. I want to get out there and some other stuff, but I've been mostly just doing short things with music, statements and so forth about Social Security, Musk, and so forth. But you'll find them at Holler Troll at TikTok, and hope you enjoy. What I really enjoy too is when people send me stuff. That's great. It educates me in ways that I might not have found on my own. So that's great too. When you answer one of mine with something else, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. The interaction with people in the comments is great. And as you probably know, maybe you don't know, every time we do a podcast, whoever's run the podcast, and this airs on YouTube, inevitably there'll be a lot of comments about you and about what you had to say and whatever. So by all means, check the comments of this particular podcast because I'm sure people would love to hear from you.
Oh, it sounds great, and I will. And hopefully I'll have a little more time to do that. That's why I enjoy your podcast. All I have to do is show up, run my mouth.
That's pretty much what I do too. I just fucking show up and start talking. So Ed, thank you very much. Those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time. I hope you have a great day. We will talk to you again tomorrow.